Hello and welcome to Sound Healing News, a special episode of Sounds Heal podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brown, and in these episodes, we explore research, headlines, and recent events in our sound healing field. Today, we're lucky to have someone featured in recent headlines, Monique Mead. She is a violinist, sound healing practitioner, educator, and entrepreneur. And she is doing amazing work in her community, both at Carnegie Mellon University and also in conjunction with University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine and their medical students. We hear about this really important work that's going on and how the students are getting involved, as well as things that Monique is offering in her community. This was a wonderful conversation, and I hope you enjoy her work and this episode with Monique Mead. All right, welcome, Monique. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Natalie. I'm a big fan, really honored to be on your podcast.
Thank you so much. And it's really wonderful, very timely. You've been in some recent headlines. But first, let's get into your background. If you'd let us know a little bit about yourself and also what sparked you to get into sound healing.
Sure. I am by trade a professional classical violinist and have been touring and performing since I was in my teens. In fact, my earliest tour was with Leonard Bernstein. I was 19 and he was almost 90. And that made a huge impact on my life and inspired me to really go fully into performing as a musician. And that led later, of course, to studying music at Indiana University. And I was also did a Fulbright in Germany later. And when it came to developing my career, I'd always been interested in making classical music accessible to young people. Because at the time, that's all that orchestras were talking about was how can we get young people interested in classical music? And so I developed in the Bernstein style this way of going on stage with a symphony orchestra, planning out an entire program, and then being the narrator and also a soloist as the violinist, explaining the music, playing the music for them, and directing their attention to things in the music that were just absolutely magnificent, and relating that to something that was interesting to them. So at the time, I was building my career in Germany, and youth in Germany were really interested in soccer, right? So I would do this, soccer and music kind of show, and so that went on for many years, and that was something that was very satisfying, and got me in front of a lot of orchestras and a lot of beautiful halls. Then, when I got married, I came here to Pittsburgh, where I am now, and had children and continued, doing my performing work as a soloist and also chamber musician. And one of the places that I perform is a place called Rancho La Puerta, which is like the #1 destination spa and resort in the world, and it's in Mexico. And I run a chamber music festival there. And every afternoon they have sound healing. And so I had no idea what this was. And I think the first time I went to it was maybe 2017. And I just laid there on the floor and somebody started playing that low C drone. And my very anxious mind all of a sudden just went blank. And I came out of that just absolutely unburdened, like a whole other version of myself. And I was impressed. I mean, I'm a musician. I've heard a lot of things in my life, but that got my attention. And I thought there's something here that I need to find out more about. And so the person who had been playing the bowls suggested this book by Mitchell Gaynor, The Healing Power of Sound, which I studied then and was just really fascinated and interested in that. But believing that, I mean, as a violinist, it takes 5 years of serious study just to play badly, right? And so I figured, like, if I'm going to learn to play the bowls, like, that's probably a whole other lifetime of learning as well. And I was very happy to discover that actually it's not that hard. And and so then time went by. Things got a little, difficult in my personal life. Hit some roadblocks, and then on top of that, here comes the pandemic, and the entire performing and all the concert halls are shut down. And I'm just going, okay, well, now what do I do? Right. And on top of that, my mother had just received a um, cancer diagnosis, and I was just sitting there thinking, what am I gonna do? And I remembered the singing bowls. And I took my government stimulus check and I bought myself my first set of singing bowls. And I was like, all right, well, now what do I do? Right. So I didn't know that you had a podcast, or else I would have listened to it, Natalie, and gotten some like really good advice from, I would have known like who the big people are and who to turn to. But I just didn't know, right? So I checked in with some people who I knew who were doing it, and I have to say, in all of the research and workshops that I did, I didn't find something that was musically satisfying to me. Um, and so as a musician, I thought, okay, I'm going to take what I've learned, and then I'm going to apply what I know about music and how it affects our emotions and our mind, how I know how it can move us from one place to the next, how I know if my intention is X, then I can actually support that with combining the music and the notes and the bowls in a certain way to achieve that intention. And so then I began working with the bowls. And at that time, my second mother, who was very close to me, also got a cancer diagnosis. So I packed up my bowls. I drove to Bloomington, Indiana, and she had just gotten out of the hospital. She had hospital dementia because she hadn't slept for 3 days. She was itching all over her body for no good reason and was absolutely miserable. And so I thought, well, I don't know. Let's see what we can do. Okay. So I began playing the bowls for her. And within 15 minutes, she stopped itching. She fell asleep and she didn't wake up for 11 hours after that. That made a huge impact on me firsthand, seeing the relief that she was able to get. And so I became even more curious and even more committed. And then started developing very seriously, and really studying, when I do this, what effect does it have on people? And fortunately, I had folks who were willing to be very honest with me and tell me when it just wasn't working. And so over the course of about a year, and thanks to my neighbor who had a private yoga studio and was open during the pandemic, I was able to develop my sound healing practice into something that I would call a protocol, to something that was working like 99.9% of the time. When I say working, getting people very relaxed into a very deep state where they were experiencing something that they would never have experienced otherwise, and then bringing them back out in an expansive state where they felt significantly better. And having done that, then the next focus was what was hitting all of us who are educators, and that was the mental health uh, crisis that was happening. And since I'm here at Carnegie Mellon University, um, that was the number one concern of the university leadership, was the mental health of their students. And I know that was a mental health concern across the country. And so once again, I was asking myself, what can we do as musicians? Like, how can we help? And so I partnered with Carnegie Mellon University, and they much to my amazement, bought an entire set of bowls and partnered with me. I'm the Director of Music Entrepreneurship here. And so under the auspices of music entrepreneurship, I have a course and I can invite students to say, hey, how do you feel about building an in-house student-run sound bath that is free and open to the entire university community here at Carnegie Mellon University? And I had, a whole host of, I had 12 students from all over campus. Most of them were musicians though. And we worked with university leadership and the fitness department to make that an integral part of the university offerings. And now, 2 years into it, it has grown and we're doing 4 sound baths a week at the university that is open to all faculty, staff, and students. And we're doing research on it, of course, because we can't just do a thing without knowing if it's working or not and what the effects are. And so the research part of it was a collaboration with researchers from the University of Pittsburgh, which is just right next door, and their behavioral health experts who helped us create a mood and stress study. And so people were taking a pretty extensive questionnaire on their mood and stress states when they were coming in to the sound bath. And we call it the Scottie Sound Bath because the Scottie dog is our mascot. So the Scottie Sound Bath. And then they would have this 45-minute experience. And afterwards, they would fill out an after summary. And over 240 people actually did this voluntarily over the course of, I bet, about 4 months or so during our sound baths. And so we got some really, really good data. And just the highlights of that data were that it reduced their perceived stress by 70% over the course of that 40-minute experience. And then it increased their ability to relax and focus by 80%. And then all of the other mood and stress indicators were also improved. And so this has now just been written up into a paper. It's going in for peer review, and I am presenting it with my assistant who did all the writing at the Global Art Symposium in Athens, Ohio, which is focusing on the intersection of arts and health, and that's going to be in April.
Wow. That's phenomenal. 240 students, that's actually a really great, sample size, isn't it? That's phenomenal. And just in response to your journey, what an amazing progression of events that's led you to this, and really at a time that people are in such need, in particular on the mental health side, anxiety, stress, and all of that. So this really brings us to the first headline. When I reached out to you, you had another headline this month as well, but the Pitt Medical Students Study, the healing power of sound with renowned CMU violinists. So that was from January 8th to 2025, and that was in the local NPR news station. It was both audio and a written piece. And it sounds like you're now offering a course at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine as well. Is that right?
That's close, Natalie. It's
Yeah.
still a course here at Carnegie Mellon University, but the students from Pitt are cross-enrolling to be able to participate. But the project course is, can we replicate this, and can we build one at the University of Pittsburgh? So it would be the Pitt sound bath for the students there, and the students who are really interested in facilitating these are medical students, dental students who have come. And for them, they found me originally because my practice, my sound healing studio, is in this beautiful mental health practice right here in Pittsburgh, and it's sort of on the main drag. It's a very beautiful spot, and I like being there because the owner who was opening this up, his name is Carlos Golfetto. He opened it up in 2021 and said, I would like to have a mental health practice, but I realize that we can talk to our clients all day, and it's not necessarily going to make them feel better right away. But I would like my clients to be able to go down the hall and be able to have an experience, a somatic experience, where after, an hour of a sound bath, they feel the way they want to feel. And when they're in that open and relaxed state, well, then we can work with them and make much greater progress. And this was really forward thinking from a mental health practice. And so they refer the clients to me, but also it makes it such that, how should I say, that I attract the mainstream folks. It's not folks who go to yoga or believe in anything, right? You don't have to believe anything. You just come in and you care about your mental health, and you're coming in with a science-backed modality that's going to help your mental health. And that's where I stand. And so I get a lot of college students who come in because they're struggling in some way. And many of these University of Pittsburgh students had come in, and then they started self-organizing, like 20 at a time. There was like, we have a huge medical exam on Monday. We're going to study all day on Sunday, and then we're going to come in for a sound bath, and we're just going to like relax. And then we're going to go take our exam on Monday morning. And by golly, they did this on their own. Like, they had the wisdom to know that this might work. And it did. And so they kept coming regularly. And then when they saw that we had established a sound bath here at Carnegie Mellon, we thought maybe we could do it at Pitt. And they are engaged. They care so much about healthcare. They care so much about their patients, and about, let's say, not making it not be scary when you come to the dentist. Like, they're thinking, how can we use sound to make life better and make healthcare better?
That is just phenomenal. I mean, you and the students are really making waves in this integrative way. And that does take us to what you're doing just in a larger scale on your community as well, with another headline just on the 13th of this month in the Post Gazette. Was that a front page one, I believe? Front page article, CMU's professors' performance shows how music can help escape a tunnel of grief. And this is about the mega surround sound bath. Tell us what that was. And gosh, it just sounds amazing. How did that all come together?
Well, Natalie, you're reading one headline, and the one that I really loved, somehow they had two headlines. The one that I really loved was called "A 90-Minute Reprieve from a World Gone Crazy."
I like that. There we go.
Oh,
That's a better one.
yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, what was that? That was the Mega Surround Sound Bath, which I thought would be a great idea at the time. So this is how it came about. I had just finished my level 2 training with, nice cohort of students. And I thought to myself, people, wouldn't it be neat if we all got together and, not performed individually, but like all at the same time, right? And since I have developed this sound protocol that we've done the research on, and this is what I teach people, is here's a starting point, right? This will take you in an arc of intention that starts people in a grounded place, that takes them into their inner world, that connects them when they're at the bottom, keeps them in a timeless space, brings them out in a space of expansion. So I teach these very specific sequences. I'm a music professor. It's like this piece of music, that piece of music, right? And so since we all know this particular protocol and sequence, it's absolutely possible for us to spread ourselves around the entire perimeter of a huge chapel and play it in a way in concert. And that's what I thought would be a nice idea to do. So I had 20 musicians and sound practitioners that I had trained, and they all came with their bowls. So we had, I don't know, 60 to 70 bowls, and I was up on the altar space with my violin, some bowls, and my daughter, who is a classical harpist. And it's nothing like harp, right? To feel relaxed. And then all of the bowls from the University of Pittsburgh that had never been played before, they were up behind me on the altar, all lit up with candles. And one of the medical doctors that I had just trained, she was playing that because it was kind of like the baptism of the bowls that was going to go to the University of Pittsburgh and start this whole training, because this chapel is on the campus of the University of Pittsburgh. Wanted to add. And so we had all these sound practitioners around, and then up in the rafters in the choir loft, and it just beautiful. And then people came, and much to my amazement, it was oversold. They were turning away really scores of people because they couldn't. They just couldn't sell them all. And so people came and they were able to lie on the pews, and or sit as they wished, gaze up at the gorgeous stained glass windows. And then this was a combination of my speaking, putting people in a relaxed state, and then having harp and sort of emerge from that, playing something on the violin, again getting people relaxed, and then going into, say, our first sequence, which is a sequence of grounding that then began at one part of the hall, moved through the back, and then came back, so people were hearing it from all over. And then that seamlessly went into, setting up the tonality of harp emerging, and then another violin piece, which was a beautiful Ave Maria, and then moving into our next sequence, right? And then again, out of that came another beautiful classical music piece, a meditation. So all of these kind of seamlessly moving in and out of instrumental music and sound bowls. It was the largest thing I have ever had to manage. And also taking into account, I was dealing with people who had never performed in their lives. I'm used to playing in an orchestra. Everybody's just used to performing everything at the same time. So I had to not only develop the notation system, of course, when I train people, that they can sort of read and understand what we're doing, but also I had to develop a conducting system so that they would know, who is changing to what. And I had people all the way down the aisle who were mimicking this sort of sign language so that people knew when to play, because there were no sight lines. So it was a huge challenge, but also incredibly beautiful and satisfying to have the entire cathedral sort of just ringing with singing bowls.
That's amazing. I mean, a lot of that is just so amazing, the art of collaboration, but really on a big scale. So having this notation that you've developed and hand signals and all of that. But can you talk a little bit about the audience? Do you think there were a lot of people there that have never experienced something like that? How is the community receiving and needing this work as well?
I always ask at the beginning who's here for the first time, and over 50% of people raised their hands. And particularly at this time of year, uh, all the celebrations are over, right? And now it's just gray and it's cold, and the burdens that we have to carry are heavier than ever. And people are looking for relief, and they're also looking for relief in community, but not necessarily having to talk to other people, right? And so the fact that a person I'll just tell you, my next door neighbor was there. Her husband had only died 3 days prior, and I had been with her in the hospital playing the violin as he died because he wanted to hear Bach. So she came out and she was there. He had gifted me a little Tibetan bowl, and I used that to open the session, and I used it to close the session. And then there was this event. She was absolutely sobbing afterwards. She said it was so incredibly healing for her that in this moment, she felt his presence right with her in the most loving and supportive and reassuring way. And for me, that was the greatest gift. That's all I needed to hear, was that it helped one person feel close to somebody she loved in her hour of grief.
Absolutely. And, that's really what it's all about, how it can bring people that comfort, that moment for rest almost. And it's also amazing how I'm sure everybody in that cathedral had their own unique experience as well, right? It's very collective and individual experience when you hold something space like that for people.
I like that you said that, collective and individual. It is, and Natalie, it's so deep, right? Because you feel something in a very profound way that you couldn't possibly express through words. And you have people there to hold the space and to witness it with you. It makes it really powerful and real. And I suppose, as opposed to a classical music concert where it's a success if like there's a standing ovation, a lot of noise afterwards, and they make you come back 5 times, I guess how I know that this was, let's say, success. I don't want to say successful. I would say meaningful, was that when it was over, people didn't leave. You know, they were in no hurry to go anywhere. They stayed, they processed, they spoke quietly to the practitioners all around. They just didn't leave. And another thing that we always say, classical music, it always ruins it for me because there's always somebody coughing in the quiet. Like somebody's always coughing. It's so annoying. And then one of my friends who's the director of, chamber of a big concert society here in Pittsburgh, was there. And I said, did you notice? Nobody coughed. I said, it is January and nobody coughed. And she said, yeah, I guess they know why they're here. So
That's so funny though. No, you're right. There is the tradition of the cougher in classical music. Oh, that's funny. Well, Monique, anything you want to mention, any developments, any other things that we haven't mentioned that weren't in the headlines that we've talked about? Just anything else you want to share about this amazing work that you're involved in?
Natalie, actually, this morning spent the whole morning here in our recital hall, and I was recording my bowls, all of them, and we were taking samples of all the bowls. And the reason for this is we are at a tech university, and as part of what I'm doing here is we're developing an app where you can actually practice sequences for singing bowls without actually having this much space and this much money and having to schlep all your stuff around. So think about it. I think we do trainings online, right? People don't necessarily have bowls yet. Not everybody is able to afford or even find, let's say, a low third octave C bowl. Who has that? Like it's impossible to get. So I feel very lucky to have it. And I want other people to be able to have that sound if they want it, right? And so I recorded all of these third octave bowls, all my fourth octave bowls, and then it's going to be put into an app so that when I'm teaching, even like these Pitt med students, right? They're going to go back to their dorms without bowls, but I need them to practice. I need them to practice. Of course, they have to practice that technique. So they'll have one bowl where they can practice the actual physical technique. But the rest, which I believe is so important, is that it's the combination of bowls and it's the sequence of moving from one to the other that is actually has the healing effect. It's, we call them intervals, as musicians. So it's that combination of two pitches. And which pitches are you going to use? And are you going to tap them so that you're experiencing a moment in time? Or are you going to drone them so that we have a sense of timelessness? And then how are you going to shift from one to the other? And which one are you actually going to play next? Because that's the one that fits with the intention that we've set. And so I want people to be able to, practice using this app. And we're going to set it up sort of also as a, almost like a game thing. So people who also just want to use it, in their hospital bed and create nice sounds will be able to, follow the light up bowls and do something that sounds nice, right? Also, if I'm going to play in a hospital and there's no place in that room to set up all these bowls, I can just take one or two, and then I can complement the sound of these bowls with this app it'll just be on my little Bluetooth speaker, right? And then I can have so much complement. So that's what we're working on right now.
That is really cool. And what a great way to just make it easier for everybody, right? To do it on their own and practice. And it's phenomenal what you've been doing for the students, and really kind of on the leading edge of bringing this to the medical world, and of course to your community as well. I hope that we can connect again in the future because I think you're going to be in more headlines with your work and upcoming research probably as well. So thank you so much for sharing a bit of your story and this really fascinating, fantastic work that you're doing there. Thanks so much, Monique.
Thank you, Natalie. Such a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thank you for
Thank you.
inviting me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Sound Healing News. If you enjoyed this conversation, please do leave a review, share, like, subscribe, all the things, so more people can find these interesting discussions and join our wonderful community. Be well and stay tuned.